Welcome back to OT Unleashed Student Takeover. I'm Katie Peterson, and today we're diving into one of the most important components of adaptive gaming, the evaluation process. In the previous episodes, we've discussed accessibility features, adaptive controllers, buttons, and switches, but before any of that gets started, we have to evaluate. Because adaptive gaming isn't about handing someone equipment, it's about matching the right tools to the right person at the right time. So, Eric, I would love to get started on this conversation and
Yeah.
talk to you kind of about why the evaluation portion of adaptive gaming is so important.
Yeah. It's interesting because as we are doing this journey of, probably over the last decade plus of adaptive gaming, and it's gotten more and more, I don't know, for lack of a better term, traction. There's a lot of people that want to do it. And a lot of more therapists and providers that want to be able to help. I realized at one point in time that there was this big discrepancy between I want to do it and how do I do it. Uh, and so as I was putting together, the Rehab Arcade, but I was going through my doctoral work and my post-professional doctorate, and I was going through an instruments class. And instruments class, you learn about all these evaluation tools and whatnot. And my professor had on one of our tests, she had said, where are the areas that we are missing an evaluation or an instrument to be able to look at assistive technology in certain places? There was stuff in farming, there was stuff in kitchens, there was stuff, like all over the place, schools, wherever you want to be. And I was like, you know what, like, obviously I've been doing stuff in gaming. There's no real evaluation in accessibility for gaming. So I remember, like, I did a quick needs assessment. I shot out a survey. I emailed a bunch of my friends that were in the adaptive gaming space, and I was like, what kind of tools do you use, for adaptive gaming, like for evaluation, and they're like, well, and it was like, not we there, I don't know of any. And one of my friends, she had said that she uses kind of a modified COPM, Canadian Occupational Performance Measure, but there wasn't really anything out there. There was no formal evaluation tool, and so so I was like, you know what, there should be one. There should be something where if I was an OT or a rec therapist or somebody who's doing adaptive gaming, like, I should have some kind of, guide to do an evaluation. And if you think about our medical model in general, like, we usually do an initial evaluation, and then we will set some goals and develop a treatment plan, right? And that's kind of how I set up the Rehab Arcade, where you have the opportunity to do an evaluation, you can set some goals, and then to go into developing a treatment plan. So that's kind of where it all started. I remember, doing kind of a survey. I actually put it out on Reddit. I put it all over the universe, all the socials. Please, fill out this survey. And from those surveys, from this kind of this research, I realized, like, nobody has an evaluation tool. As a matter of fact, and the people that don't have those tools also responded that they would not feel confident doing an evaluation or having a person that had needed a gaming assessment or a gaming workup. And so that's kind of where it started for me, just like saying, hey, we need to have a tool. Let's go out and make one. So that
Yeah.
was the start of it, knowing that needed to happen.
Yeah, you definitely identified that big gap in game
Yeah.
accessibility. And that is like the big question for most practitioners is where do I begin? How do I get started? And how do I evaluate the needs of my patient and enable them to
Yeah.
be able to game?
Yeah.
So what kind of things did you really find were like the big areas of concern when assessing a patient?
Yeah. Well, if you look at it, I think when people think accessibility in video games or really accessibility anywhere, we start too far down the line. We think about the equipment first, right?
For
So
sure.
we're not starting with equipment here. We're starting about function,
Hmm.
right? We wanted to make sure that I could take everything that a person could do, that they had physical control over on their bodies, and utilize them to be able to play video games. And so the evaluation portion of the tool that I had created was all about performance. Do I have actual use, and can I replicate these movements of the human body, whether it be, any kind of physical movement like my, arms, shoulders, legs, feet, whatever, or could I do eye gaze? Is my cognition intact? Do I have vision? Can I do sip and puff controls? Head and neck movements. Like those are all the things that I wanted to tap into to be able to say we have now identified everything that somebody can use to be able to play. And that's kind of where it really started, for my segment, portion of the evaluation piece.
Yeah, so you really looked at those performance skills and looked at the person and kind of established that occupational profile and
Yeah,
looked at what they're able to do versus what they can't do, right?
right, right.
So you looked at motor skills, cognitive skills, sensory skills too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, touch, if you don't know you're touching something, sometimes it's tricky to activate that. And not necessarily all the time. I mean, it's possible that you don't have sensation, but you can still activate a switch,
Right.
so,
So
you
you
know,
really looked at the whole person, which is
yeah,
what, and that just guided and allowed you to really understand the individual rather than just trying to make the individual conform to the equipment that you were providing.
yeah, absolutely.
That's
Well, and this is how it works, right? I mean, we're making custom setups for people who don't know what they can do and what they can't do, and so that's where it kind of has to start. And so that tool that I ended up working on, and I came to, we call it the Game Up tool. It's the gaming assessment and measurement for enabled user performance. Right now we're on version 1.3, and we're constantly modifying so that we can keep making it better and better, as we kind of learn from that. So, so I'm excited to kind of work through that, and then also share another assessment that is very separate that a colleague of mine also used as well.
that's awesome. So are you getting information from like OTs that are currently using the tool and kind of getting their feedback and always
Yeah,
working to make the assessment better and better like that? Or how are you getting feedback and continuing to make the tool better
yeah.
in the future?
Yeah, it's a great question, and honestly, it's a little bit of both, right? So when I go out and do gaming clinics, I will use it to just see how it works on specific clients. So if I'm going to, I do an annual clinic for a spinal cord injury organization, and so I will typically take it out, do an assessment evaluation on those individuals, and then I also do clinics for amputees. So I'll do, and it's very different, right? So like
Right.
amputees, a lot of times I'm going to use feet and legs, whereas spinal cord injuries, I'm going to use their upper extremities and head and neck and stuff. So I use it personally, and kind of some of the feedback that I have is the feedback for myself.
Right.
But also, anytime that I'll have an OT or therapist that reaches out and said, "Hey, can you help us?" I will also say what I want to start with is this. And so I give them the tool and say, I want you to do a full assessment, see what you think, give me some feedback, and then we'll also go from there. So it's a little bit of everywhere, So,
Yeah.
and it's not like I get hundreds and hundreds of, OTs a year giving me feedback. It's more like, 5 to 10 people, giving
Right.
me feedback. So, but it's there, and I think that the more tools we have, the better off we are to be able to be more effective for our clients.
Absolutely. And you already kind of talked about how there's already assessment tools for cooking and
Yeah.
farming, and why not gaming? Gaming is
Yeah.
so prevalent in our
Yeah.
society, and there's so many gamers out there. So why wouldn't we have an assessment that would be
Sure.
able to guide practitioners through this process that can be very, very specific and detailed?
Yeah.
Can you kind of like walk us through a little bit about like what kind of sections are in
Yeah.
the Game Up version 1.2
Yeah.
right now?
Yeah, that's so as I was developing this, the one thing that I wanted to make sure is that anybody that grabbed this tool would feel comfortable with it. And so the very first, and we're going to share, the Game Up tool here, and we'll kind of take you through and give you some ideas, and we'll also put some links in the show notes where you can access the Game Up, so you can have that for yourself if you want it. But the first thing, that I do is like I want to make people feel comfortable. Like if you're a therapist who doesn't know anything about video games, it introduces just like what this is and what it isn't also. And what I don't want people to take out of this is I do this evaluation, then I don't, but you didn't provide any solutions. This is
Yeah.
strictly an evaluation. It's kind of, if you were to do a 9-hole peg test, it says, okay, you have decreased fine motor. It doesn't say, and here's the solutions for the decreased fine motor.
Mhm.
So this tool is all about identifying the ability to engage with certain things. It's not. It doesn't give you the stuff, although there are resources on it for that.
Yeah.
But let me take it through it a little bit. But the first section basically introduces it. The second section, it talks about video game controller inputs, because I think that it's important to understand what is on a typical traditional controller. What do I have to navigate to be able to play a video game? And so we talk about things like thumbsticks and the action buttons and bumpers and triggers, the menu items, start buttons, maybe there's speakers, maybe there's haptic feedback, all kinds of things that are in a typical controller. So I walk down what all that is and just kind of introduce that to people that aren't sure what to expect from that,
Yeah, that's such an awesome feature because like I mean, a lot of people like don't necessarily know what these things are. So including that I think is a awesome first step.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, again, like I don't want you to think I need to know everything. That's
Hmm.
why I put this in here. So I need to, all you have to do is read, right? So,
Right.
and so like, so, you introduce like what's on the controller. And then the second thing is like, how could I possibly play video games? So the
Mhm.
next section is dedicated to like, what are things that I could potentially harness to be able to play. And so I kind of break it down like hands and fingers would be very obvious, but that's on the list, right? Arms and shoulders on the list. Eyes, vision, voice, and speech, because I potentially could use voice to be able to activate certain things. And that's becoming more and more prevalent with our smart devices and whatnot. Different body movements. So not only using my hands and fingers to move, but also like, can I use like tracking systems? Can I use accelerometers to detect movement,
Mhm.
things like that. And then, of course, cognition, brain activity. We potentially could tap into that. And though that I'm not an expert in all of these things. Like I couldn't tell you like here's how to play a video game with wires connected to your brain. Like I
Yeah.
couldn't do that, but it's on there, right? So these are all the things that we basically kind of tap into to be able to play. And so the second part is how could I play if I wanted to?
Yeah, no,
If
that's
that makes
awesome
sense.
because I think a lot of people just think that you have to only have function in your hands and maybe your arms and upper
Yeah.
extremities just to play when that is not necessarily the case. Like we can
Right.
adapt the game, like we've talked about with our adaptive controllers and our buttons and switches and our future episode on mounts positioning,
Yeah.
to be able to allow the players to engage in the game and making sure that that is still rolling in the brain and making sure that practitioners are aware that it's not always just your hands and your upper extremities that you need to assess. It's the whole body as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and honestly, like if you don't do that, then you're missing a lot of opportunities,
For
right?
sure.
And I will say the one cool thing about this particular tool is at no point in time, and actually my whole research part of this was to approach evaluation with an ability focused lens. And so
Mhm.
I didn't want to go into this. So if the first thing that you do when you come up to your client is say, oh, well, shoot, they don't have hands, or they don't have the ability to do that. Oh, they don't have this, or they don't have that. Then we've already missed the boat, right?
Right.
Everything that somebody has is bonus from me. So if I walk up to somebody and they're a high spinal cord injury, but they still have head and neck motion, I'm like, ooh, celebrate. We can use those things. So it's an ability focused lens. The instrument, it's all about excitement every time you discover something new. So as you go through, you're like, ooh, you've got shoulder flexion. We can use that. Oh my gosh, you have feet? We can use your feet. That's
Right.
awesome. We could use, internal, external rotation. Like all of these things have potential to be able to engage. And so really, like one of the big parts of this was let's look at the abilities rather than, oh, my son can't do these things. Oh, so sad. No, no, no.
Yeah.
Your child can do all these things. And matter of fact, on the screen you'll see I've got a young lady that will show you that that I worked with. She's a young girl that I had been able to play independently, and she didn't have legs or arms. The only articulating joint that she had was a teeny tiny little bit of her shoulder, her left shoulder, and it's such an incredible thing to watch to see her play
Yeah.
despite having these things. And we put head and neck switches on and then a shoulder, and that was it. So, but a big part of this is evaluation, right? We have to start somewhere and be able to identify those things.
Right. And this assessment does a really great job of walking you through every single body function, kind of, right?
Yeah.
Can you kind of give
Yeah.
us like an idea of what the process is and the sequence of going through it is like?
Yeah, how I tackled it was I decided that I was going to just take you from kind of top down.
Mhm.
And by top down I mean more like start at the shoulders and then we'll go to head. But if you are an OT or an OT student right now and you have recently gone through like maybe a range of motion screen, or manual muscle testing or anything like that, this should really feel comfortable to you. And so what I do is I take you through each part of the body and we start talking about it. So the very first section is upper extremity movement, right? And fun fact, I started with the left upper extremity because I'm lefty. And so righties always get all the attention. So I decided left would get the first nod in this. So left upper extremity. So the first thing I asked, like, do they have any access to movement in their left upper extremity? And if they don't, then we completely skip that section. Or if it's an amputee, we completely skip that section. We just push no, and we go to the next question that will take us into the right upper extremity. But if you do have some movement, and let's think about like if you have you're a stroke survivor, and maybe your arm isn't like perfect, but it definitely does have some movement. We're going to tap into that. Maybe you have movement in your shoulder and elbow, but maybe not your hand. You're
Yeah.
still going to tap into this. So all you would do is start working your way down, right? So I took basically every movement that the upper extremity have, whether it be shoulder abduction, adduction, shoulder flexion, extension, internal, external rotation, all the movements of the shoulder, and all of those are possible switch placements. So if I'm looking to do abduction, I can put a switch out to the left of my shoulder, and that's a button press, right? Or switch activation. If I have flexion and extension, those are two activations that I can do, and I can put switches in those places to activate those. So all of those things can serve me in a space that is adaptive gaming. And of course, then we go down to the right upper extremity, and we'll do the same thing for those. Well, we go down to the elbow, extension, flexion. We go down to the wrist. We even do ulnar and radial deviation. Those could be two separate switches. We go down to the digits. Do you have movement in your digits? Like those are all potential activations and switches. And so then we go to the right upper extremity, and then we start going into the lower extremity because, like, at the end of the day, again, it might be an amputee.
Right.
Like there could be the ability to use the lower extremities to be able to play. Matter of fact, on one of our podcasts in the future, we're going to be talking about a fully accessible lower extremity controller that if you were an upper extremity amputee and you can only use your feet, this would be a great option for you. So we go from the upper extremity to lower extremity. We talk about hip abduction, flexion, extension, knee flexion, extension. All of these are switches in my brain,
Yeah.
and it's not just about the or the upper extremities, lower extremities. We can also do head and neck, right? So do they have flexion, extension? Do they have lateral flexion, extension? So it could be forward and back. It could be, ear to ear, or you could even do clockwise.
Right.
You could do rotations. So those are 6 different switches, potential, activations right there. And then we go down to other functions like vision, speech and breath control, and whatnot. And so that is kind of like the big screen that we're looking for to be able to like check all those boxes. That's kind of how it starts.
That is so awesome. I love this assessment and this evaluation tool too because it really is so detailed. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes like you go to do a certain eval tool and you're kind of like, all right, this is like still a little vague because it's asking me like the strength in the arm. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, the arm's got the shoulder, the elbow,
Yeah.
the wrist. Like, it's really
Yeah.
looking at every specific feature of the individual and, knowing that we can adapt the game and provide a switch or a controller
Yeah.
that the client has the ability to do. So it all goes back to what you were saying before about looking at the ability of the client and the
Yeah.
individual and not just trying to create something that they can use when they don't have the ability to. Like it's
Yeah.
it's about them and it's not
Yeah.
about trying to
Right.
do something that's not obviously going to work because everybody's
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
So I really love
Yeah.
how detailed this is and that it
Yeah.
really makes you think about all the different skills and body functions and how we can customize the experience to the individual.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, obviously, I put this together myself, but I wanted that. Like, that's the feedback that I wanted. I
Yeah,
wanted to be in a situation where somebody felt so overly comfortable. There was no questions there, and whatnot. And even in the after you do that full evaluation, like I basically have you consolidate all of the things that you've just figured out. Matter of fact, I even congratulate you. It's like, congratulations, you've successfully identified several ways that your client can engage in gaming, right? And so then I have, basically a list where you can consolidate all of those things into one space that you can see. And then what I always tell people is, from that list, you probably will identify, anywhere from like 10 to 20, maybe 30 different ways that somebody could access, movement or access a switch. And you might only need 5 of those to be able to play a game.
right.
There's only 22 inputs on a controller. And so if you've identified a bunch of them, then we're already like where we need to be. So that's really important. And that's basically that's the evaluation. Part of the tool also does go down into accessible gaming resources,
Mhm.
and I talk about Microsoft Xbox, which is a great space to find accessibility options, but also Special Effect is an incredible organization over in the UK. Able Gamers Charity is a great organization here, and there's just some other places where we can, of course, the Rehab Arcade, but we can send people to find, now what do I do? How do I find switches, and where do we go from there? So that is that particular evaluation in general. So it gets you a really good kind of foundation of where to start.
Right. I think that's awesome. And I love that it provides you with just like a couple different like resources at the end just to kind of get the balls rolling. Um,
Yeah,
and I think it's great. There is another evaluation tool that I do want to talk about just a little bit.
yeah,
It's called the Game Tool, and it's from the MGH Institution of Health Professionals.
okay,
And this tool kind of focuses more on the gamer and their gaming interests and their specific goals. Could you kind of touch base a little bit about
yeah.
what that one is and how it differentiates between the Game Up tool?
Yeah, it's interesting. A friend of mine, Kevin Berner, he came up with this tool almost parallel to me coming up with the Game Up tool, and I don't think either of us knew that it was happening. I was presenting about the Game Up tool at a conference, and he approached me. He's like, "Eric, I've got this game tool, like." And it's funny that we both used an acronym for game,
Right.
and his is Game Adaptation, Modification, and Experience Tool. And honestly, it's so beautiful because his tool, the game tool, which we'll put a link to how to access that tool in the show notes below, but it's all about the person behind it and their motivations to play, so instead of doing an evaluation of the body and performance, he's doing an evaluation of what they want, right? So so it starts out with simple question like, why do you want to game? What's the point? And some of it's like, I want to be social because they're fun. It's my life, things like that.
Yeah.
And then they ask about what kind of games do you like? So they go into like, action adventure or sports or, in-person, party games, whatever. They have a bunch of different options there. And so the whole tool that he made was about the game experience for the client, and really wanting to know what it looks like in their life, the occupation of gaming, if you
Right.
will. And so it's really cool because it's a very, really beautifully complementary tool to the tool that I have. I actually look at this one as something where you walk in, like if you think about medical model again, you walk into the clinic and you see the receptionist and they say, "Hey, I want you to fill out this questionnaire,"
Hmm.
and this is the one they get. And then
Yeah.
you go back to the treatment or the clinic, and then your therapist goes through the Game Up tool, to
Right.
do the evaluation part of it. So then between the two of them, you have this gorgeous like picture of the gamer and then their abilities,
Yeah.
and so it's really cool because also, they on the game tool that Kevin did, there's also parts that are about goal setting, like what kind of goals you want to set for this itself. So, not only could we do accessible gaming, but also we could do set goals on how to use gaming either therapeutically or to empower somebody to be able to play. So it's all kind of, I mean, it's just it's really cool that we came to a similar space where we wanted to enable people, but at the same time, have different approaches to what that looks like.
Yeah, I think it's awesome that they can like really supplement each other, and really enhance that evaluation process even more.
Yeah,
Because between the both of you, you guys have really thought about the whole big picture of whether you're looking
yeah,
at the performance skills or the body function. And then you're
yeah,
looking at also the occupation and why
yeah,
it's important to each client because
yeah,
that's going to impact their motivation in therapy or whatever they're doing. So I think that both of these together really enhance the perspective from the therapist and
yeah,
get a bigger picture of how they can enhance the client's life through adaptation or
yeah.
looking at it from that occupation-based approach as well.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
very cool.
yeah, I totally agree. It's again just crazy to me that we came to this place separately and they're so complementary of each other,
Yeah.
So that's, I think, again, that's a really cool space for me. And again, this is for people that aren't necessarily comfortable. So for me, and I'll kind of roll it back a little bit. There might be a point that if you're a therapist or an OT out there, that you start feeling super confident with your ability to engage with adaptive gaming or whatever. You may not need a tool. Like I don't need the tool for me because I've done it so many times. I'm already comfortable with it, right?
Yeah.
I can go in, I can see what we need to see, and then I don't necessarily need to go through the whole rigmarole. I can identify accessibility already, from the minute we start. But my tool is designed for people who may not have that confidence quite yet,
Yeah.
and so to have both of those things, to have a really good picture it's beautiful,
Yeah, no,
in my opinion.
I mean, I
Yeah.
think about like the time that I spent in an outpatient clinic working with a lot of stroke patients,
Yeah.
and them coming in and telling me that they really want to get back to whatever it is. If someone came in and said, I really want to get back to gaming, and you had no idea on what to do, these two tools together really lay that foundation and give you a really good structured guide to be able to evaluate effectively, even if you are not a expert in this field. So
Yeah.
I think that
Completely
like
agree.
you really bridge the gap there on trying
Yeah.
to help, give therapists the tools that they need to evaluate and treat and understand the gamers out there and how
Yeah.
to make it more accessible, which
Yeah.
that's we're trying to advocate each day, and by creating this assessment and evaluation tool, it really helped, you know, shorten that gap just a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. So, and hopefully that, people get more and more comfortable and confident. And, if you look at this, this tool could be for, tech in general, like
Yeah.
you could use this, for, smart devices. You could use it for, other, tech related stuff, computers and, using a mouse, using a keyboard, like all of these potentially could come into play, for people to be able to engage in life really in total, so that's all good points. So
Well, it's so awesome. And I have really loved this conversation because it really answers the question of where do I begin and how do I get started in this? And
yeah,
we touched a lot on, the equipment, but you have to start with the individual and
yeah,
really analyzing them and evaluating them and their ability to participate in adaptive gaming and gaming in general. So
yeah,
it has been great, and
cool.
I'm so, so excited that we got to highlight these awesome evaluation tools.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Alrighty,
So, and I
well,
can't wait to, well, I was just going to say, I can't wait, again, this is the first step. And so it's going to be nice to kind of jump into kind of where do you go next from, with this information. And even like, I think we have a whole episode on documentation,
yes.
and
Yes.
how do we put this on paper? So it'll be exciting to kind of walk down that road. So, but we'll save that for another day.
Well, thanks again, Eric, for walking us through this super essential part of this process. And thanks everybody for listening in, and we will see you next time on the OT Unleashed Student Takeover series.
And before we sign off real quick, you can get both of these or have access to both of these on the Rehab Arcade, but also I have a link to the game tool for the other one on that as well. So if you want to check those out, they're both there for you. But
Awesome.
yeah, thanks again.
Thanks. Bye.